Leer. Wildside.
Welcome to the podcast. This week's guest needs no introduction if you're a fan of walleye tournament fishing, because he is the hottest man on the globe. I'm talking about Korey Sprengel. Hot off a second place finish at the National Walleye Tour Championship. And I bring that up because that second place finish sealed his deal on his most coveted accolade, Angler of the Year on the National Walleye Tour. Absolutely amazing. Of course, he is the winningest angler in National Walleye Tour history with 5 wins, over $570,000 in accumulated cash prizes from the National Walleye Tour. Kicked off this season with his win at Oconto, the Bay of Green Bay, which is home water, which is available on episode 10, by the way. So make sure you stop by and see that. But absolutely incredible year for Korey Sprengel to take home Angler of the Year. After that Oconto event, he went on to finish 39th at the Sault Ste. Marie event. Thought the game was over, but he comes back strong. 11th place, Sakakawea. Ends up second to his good friend Jason Shakurat at the most recent championship. So an incredible season. Takes home the prize for Angler of the Year. Plus, what we talk about on this episode isn't just the season. It's kind of getting a little better understanding of how he approaches events mentally. And it's stuff that really excites me from the fact that he is doing this really from a different perspective or a different approach to tournaments that traditional tournament anglers have had, especially in the walleye world, to this point. So it's definitely Korey Sprengel-ish, because all over it. Before we get to the episode though, please drop down, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode of the Wildside podcast, and get to chipleer.com, sign up for the newsletter. We'll make sure we deliver them to you each and every episode. But right now, sit back and listen and have your mind expanded in the world of walleye and how you can become a better tournament angler using the same tactics as Korey Sprengel. Korey Sprengel, Angler of the Year. That sounds pretty good, man.
Yes, finally, right?
Absolutely. But I'm gonna kick this thing off. I love the smile. You've been waiting a while to hear that. But
yeah, for sure.
When we talk about your accolades, which are absolutely incredible, at NWT only, we got 5 wins. We've got over $500,000 in winnings. You got 10 top 10s, which 21 checks in 32 events, which is just mind-boggling to me, because that's the top 25% of the field. Your worst finish in the National Walleye Tour since we started is 70th. After that, it's 46th. Inside the top 10 of the Angler of the Year every year. In fact, averaging, since you started, 5th place in the Angler of the Year, which is crazy. And now an Angler of the Year trophy. Of all that stuff inside of the National Walleye Tour, does one thing mean more than another?
I mean, there's a couple wins up there that I guess probably mean more than anything, just because of, how I had to earn them, or, how much, how many adjustments and mental, frustrations I had to get those wins. Obviously, a lot of those wins come unexpected, and that's just kind of how I fish and how I've learned to pre-fish, is just, go fishing and make something happen, because whatever happened, in practice or, a year before doesn't mean anything. It has to come from that day, and each day is different. And so some of those wins there, especially that Lake Winnebago, I think it was 2014, 2015 championship that I won. I mean, that was a super tough event. It was just all about getting 5 bites. And when those bites happened, I was pitching a jig. It was so exciting. I mean, literally your heart stopped, because you knew you had to get it in the boat. And so some of those events in those wins really mean a lot. And some of my younger wins, I guess, like my FLW win and even that NTC, and that was kind of what really got me mentally prepared and gave me that confidence. But Angler of the Year is obviously up there. It finally came full circle, and it does mean a lot.
Well, you talk about full circle. In 2013, I mean, you won two events that year. We kicked off the National Walleye Tour. You win two events. You're tied for Angler of the Year in terms of points, but you lose it in the tiebreaker. I mean, that had to be just gut wrenching. I mean, what did that feel like?
That was honestly probably one of the lowest points of my career of everything I'd done, because I left the weigh-in knowing that I won Angler of the Year, and it was actually my good buddy who was staying next to me, Chase Parsons, came up to me while I was putting the cover on my boat to be done with the season, and he's like, "You have to go back to the weigh-in," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I can't tell you." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, he tells me everything. And he's like, "I'm not going to be the guy. Like, you have to call Anthony and you have to get back there." And so I finally got it out of him. And obviously it was devastating. And, but at the same time, like, it was a great season, but, it was a tough pill to swallow.
So is that was 2013? We fast forward to now, and you know what? Chase Parsons is shaking your hand when it's all over, right? Because I mean, you surpassed everybody in that tournament to end up in second place and slam dunk Angler of the Year.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't feel right going to Lake Erie. Trying to hold my spot at Angler of the Year just because of the body of water it is right now. Like, I knew it was gonna be that close. There was gonna be very few things that was gonna separate you from anyone else, and it was just all about going through as many fish. And so it was just one of those things where I didn't feel good going out either one of those days and trying to get a pound more or a half pound more than someone else, because I knew obviously Kolb and Hoyer were going to be right there if I slipped, and I knew I had to be on the top 10 to make sure I could seal the deal.
Incredibly competitive, no doubt. But what did it feel like when it became reality? You're like, okay, this thing is in my hand, and I mean, there is still a possibility, even through that last day, that I mean, if something terrible happens, or you don't get back in on time, or somehow some weird set of circumstances prevent you from finishing, you know what I mean? I mean, you
Yep.
hoisted the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good. I'd say on day two, it was about an hour and a half to go. We got a 7.5 pounder or so, and I knew right then I had a good bag already. And you throw that on top of it, that I was fishing on the top 10 day, probably no question. And so I knew probably about then that there was not much I could do to lose it. And it honestly felt really good going out on day three. In second place, I had zero pressure on me because the main goal was Angler of the Year. And after that, whatever happened. And Jason was in front of me and I was pulling for him more than me probably. And so I just wanted to be right there at the end of the day if he slipped and I could take it from him.
Well, you did just that.
It was tight, but we squeezed it in together.
So, tell me about. So, are you approaching every event to win, or because I've asked this because I mean I know Angler of the Year has been really high on your list, right? So we go through this tipsy turvy year. We can go through results, and we'll get there at some point as we go through the events. But there's a point in the season where you look like you're out of the race completely because you just can't not catch limits and still find yourself in contention. So, I mean, are you fishing at any point just for Angler of the Year, or are you going into every day trying to win an event, if so can be?
I'd say I'm going into every event trying to be in the top 10. I mean, you can't. There's consistency means everything. I mean, if we had 3-day tournaments, it'd be a way easier for the way I fish to be towards the top. And so for me, 2-day events, I mean, you can have two consistent days and move your way right up at the end of day two. And so that's what I shoot for, is just to try to, make sure that I'm going to get the bites, that my program or whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to get enough bites and hopefully potentially the right ones. So that way, when it does all come full circle, that in 2 days, I might be towards the top. But I'm not always necessarily trying to just hit the home run and just go for those 5 big bites like a lot of guys do. And, You see a lot of those guys, they're up at the top, maybe 1 or 2 events in the year, and they're on the bottom the other 2. And you said that my worst finish was 70 someplace. I know exactly where that event was. It was Missouri River out of Mobridge, the first time I'd ever been there. And I fished a slot tournament the total backwards way that you should have ever. I never went for a big fish the whole time. We had really terrible weather for that one. We couldn't run around because it was like a hurricane with all the rain. And I just fished small fish all day, and it makes sense why I was in 70 someplace. And so ever since then, I've actually Chase Parsons gave me a little pep talk on how to fish the Missouri River on a slot, and I learned a lot from it. And next time we were there, I think I finished in like 12th or 13th. And but it's just one of those things where, at the end of the day, you have to come in with 5 fish, like you said. And I've had this conversation with the guys I travel with so many times, and almost probably made them really mad because of the way they're going to go out fishing. And I'm like, here's the deal, guys. Like, you need to start the first half of your day going on, some sort of big fish bite. I mean, you might have had one big fish bite in practice, but you might have learned something in the week that you were there, that you have a good chance that if you figure it out, you're going to get 1 bite, maybe 2 good bites that might separate yourself. And then it might save the last hour or 2 hours, whatever I think it's going to take to go scrap up a limit, however I can do it. And so, but at the same time, I'm giving myself a chance to do really well. If I get 1 or 2 bites, in the morning, and maybe a bite or 2 in the afternoon, and I have 3 or 4 fish and I scrap up a limit, I'm there. But the next day, if I get 5 of them, I'm really there towards the top. But you always got to give yourself a chance. You don't want to go into so many of these no calling events and put 5 mediocre fish in the box just to have a limit, and then try saving 1 or 2 spots for a big fish or 2. You got to give yourself the confidence in yourself to go try to catch 1 or 2 big bites, and you might learn something that day. And also now you have 3 to 5 of those big bites, and you're right where you want to be.
So your mentality that is quite a bit different than the way most anglers go about it. So you go big right out of the box.
I mean, you have to spend half your day on either a assumption of, maybe where you can grab a big fish or 2, or maybe it's just a pattern where you're just going to run a pattern over a bunch of spots. I mean, the whole key is you have to run in the multiple day tournaments freshwater generally at some time. Either something you haven't done, but it's a pattern, it looks right. I spend so much time in practice just graphing and, just learning spots. I don't have to fish them. It might not be something I think I'm going to fish this year. It could be in the future, but I want to learn them. So if I'm on my way back in with 5 minutes to go and I get close to the ramp, I want to be able to fish, a spot without even having to, it happened this time at Sakakawea. I literally side imaged the point coming into Garrison Bay. So if I ever had a long run and I needed to fish a spot for 5 or 10 minutes, and on day 1, I didn't go there. And on day 2, I pull in there with, I think, 3 minutes to go, and I caught a 22-incher right at the end of the day. I didn't need it because I had all 24-plus-inch fish, but it's just one of those things. I knew how it laid. So it was literally my co-angler's first cast right on the tip of the point. We had the fish, but it was all because I had graphed it in practice and never even fished it. And so it comes down to culling events. You can go throw 5 fish in the box and, take some pressure off and go big fish hunting. But I'd say a quarter of the events we can cull, if not less. Some seasons we can't cull at all. And so you put a huge restrictor plate on your performance, putting a bunch of fish in the live well that are 18 to 20 inches on a body of water that 25 inches are what you want. And so it's just one of those things where you have to have confidence in yourself that you can put something together and leave room in your live well for them.
So as you're pre-fishing, how do you establish like a baseline for what you think you're going to need at that particular event? How does that mark up? Because it sounds like there's some strategy obviously involved depending on the body of water, but at the same token, you got to know whether for the ones that we can't call, how do you decide what's number to put, is it over 18 inches? Is it over 19 inches? Is it over 16 inches?
I'd say in a week of practice or 5 days or whatever we're out there, you get an idea after come tournament time, what that's going to be. If you're only getting a couple of good fish in a week that are 23 plus inches, I mean, that's probably your mark. But one thing I do, and it was huge this year. I mean, I don't measure fish as much as I weigh them. I weigh them more times than not. Green Bay was a huge thing. I'd found a basically a 5 mile area, 3 miles, whatever it was, that those fish were all like a quarter to a half pound heavier. They're just super fat fish. And obviously they're super deceiving just throwing them on a measuring stick and, well, this one's 24. And, but if it's a quarter pound or half pound more over 5 fish, I mean, you have a lot of weight there in 2 days. And same with Lake Erie was the same way. There was schools out there that those fish must have been feeding on more bait or had more time in the area that were heavier. And, I think a lot of guys make the mistake, even the guys I travel with, I'm like, you just got to weigh the fish, like, because that's what, at the end of the day, we're weighing the fish when we go across the National Walleye Tour stage. We're not measuring them. So let's get the idea that, this school is generally heavier, and it really doesn't matter how long they are.
So are you measuring every fish during pre-fish or just some of them?
I'd say on, Lake Erie, Green Bay this year, when I knew it was going to come down to, pretty tight, any fish that's a fish I'm going to consider on weighing, if it's 21 plus inches, like, I'm going to weigh it, because there's 21 inches I had on Green Bay that were 4.5 pounds. I mean, I'd have took, 4.5, 5 pounder all day for my 5th fish if I needed it, or 6 fish, whatever. And so I don't weigh, I'd say 80% of them probably. You go to Devil's Lake and places like that. The east side, generally has sometimes skinnier fish in the summer. The west side has fatter fish. I mean, it's just one of those things where you learn over time, or you learn on that, I guess, event that you're there. You figure something out generally by weighing fish.
So when you're pre-fishing, how many fish do you have to catch to create, whether it be a pattern or a spot? I mean, how many times do you have to duplicate something before you put it in your head that, like, hey, I might be seeing something happen here?
I honestly don't have to do it a lot. It's just one of those things where I just want to get a few fish, and I don't even have to catch a lot on one spot. It's just, if I catch, either a decent amount on, one spot, that's got some, maybe it's weeds and rock mix and, like, 8 to 10 feet of water. And then I go to another spot, maybe a ways away, and there's I catch one fish there. That's all I need to catch, because that's a pattern. And to me, because obviously it could be 5 days before the event, it could be 3 days before. I mean, I could never catch another fish there, though, that year, or I could catch them in every spot I go like that. But at the end of the day, I don't need to waste my time catching fish in practice. I need to understand as many spots and gain as many spots on that pattern as I can, and I'll fish them on tournament day. Because, I don't want to get false hope when I go into a tournament that this is my best spot. I just want to fish them like I do, fishing for fun or fishing in practice, because it's so much easier to find fish in practice, because that's what you're trying to do. So generally, at the end of the day, you find more spots and you catch more fish in practice, because you're always moving. You're leaving fish to find fish. And in a tournament, a lot of guys just settle into an area because of what they did in the past, or in the day before, or 5 days before. And they just don't move around enough to figure out where the fish went. And so if you don't establish that baseline of what you should be doing that day, and the fish should be this size because I was catching them this size, if you never establish that pattern, you don't know what to expect for the tournament as much. And so it's not in your head that, well, I need to have 25 pounds because everywhere I went, I caught a 25 incher. So right away, come tournament time, if the 25 inchers aren't biting, you might only need 20 inchers for the tournament to do well. And so, but if you never have that in the back of your mind, you're not throwing fish back possibly, that you probably need. And it's just one of those things where I try to have an open mind, and have the confidence in myself that I have 8 hours to figure something out. And I hope I figured out enough patterns in practice. I have enough ideas on baits, that I can have confidence when I roll into a spot that if there's an active fish there, I should catch it soon enough. Because let's face it, it's easy to catch them when there's enough around. It's a lot harder to catch them when there's only a couple around.
So have you always had the ability to stay calm and process information like that? Or do you work at that? Or is this something you've learned?
It's something I've learned, and I never used to be like this when I was younger. And it's kind of that confidence thing with success. But it definitely, those FLW win that I had, I mean, I couldn't pull into an area that I hadn't fished before. I mean, that was back in when I was 24 years old, I think. I mean, if I hadn't fished there and I didn't have a waypoint there, I mean, I couldn't fish there in the tournament. It was just that simple, like, and I've gotten to the point now, It was that first National Walleye Tour win in Red Wing. I didn't have a lot going on going into that tournament. I had a few patterns and a few areas I wanted to play around with and hopefully get a bite. But I fished pretty free for that tournament. For the, I said majority of the day, I started in an area and kind of settled in, but I just went fishing because I didn't have a lot. And, between hand lining, pitching jigs, and doing whatever, I put 5 fish in the boat, and that's kind of the start of it. I gained confidence. Obviously, I had success in that one, but it's happened many times over and over again. Where if you just go out there with an open mind, you can catch fish easier than you can just having my eyes set on I'm going to this spot and I'm fishing there all day. Because how many times do you hear when you go across stage, Chip? I should have had this. I should have had that because I've been catching them all week. Well, it doesn't matter what you caught before the tournament. And so it's just one of those things where I try to do as much homework, just, learning areas with side imaging and mapping them out. So when I roll into a spot, I know the key area, I might take 10 minutes in the tournament. And if I don't get a bite, they're probably not there. I mean, if I get one bite, I'll work it more and more. And, it's just one of those things. They're not easy. They're not hard to catch when they're there. They're really hard to catch when they're not.
So do you do the same thing hunting? Do you have the same kind of mentality? I mean, because you're kind of getting at there. What was going through my head when you're talking is like, it's hunting season, right? So we're coming into this mentality where you're going to sit in a deer stand and wait for the deer to come by you, which is one technique walleye fishing, is to rig it up and wait for the fish to turn on. Or you can go for a walkabout in the woods and try to find the deer that's moving or stumble upon where they're sleeping, right?
Yeah, so maybe that's why I don't like deer hunting as much, because you just get away, right? Maybe that's why Shakira likes it more than I do. But no, I like waterfowl hunting and duck hunting. And ironically, like this morning, I had a lot of things I wanted to get done before we talked. And but I did drive to one of the bodies of water by me, and I have a bunch of optics, spotting scopes, binoculars, and I had all the highest spots in the area where I can glass as far as I can. And what I do, duck hunting, is a lot of scouting, just like you do fishing. And so I try to learn, obviously where the birds are working, what area, where they're coming from, going to, and how I can intercept them. And I try to set up on them each morning. I very rarely go duck hunting going to an area that I hadn't scouted. If they're not there, I don't want to hunt there. I want to hunt where they're using and set up accordingly. And it's very similar to fishing, and exactly what I do throughout the summer.
So do you look backwards too? So let's look backwards. Let's go back to Lake Erie. Shakira beat you by a half a pound. Okay. So where do we find that extra half pound? Did it get left on the table somewhere?
Oh yeah, it did.
Do you know where that is?
It was that 5-pounder I threw back on day 2. I think it was day 2 or day 1. Must have came off right at the boat, whatever, and snagged itself in the side, because brought the fish in so easy the whole way in. I'm bringing it up and it starts running, and then just like that, it got super heavy. And obviously I had it bent in a U when I had it 20 feet from the boat. I literally remember telling my conger, I'm like, I don't know what happened. This just got really heavy. And I actually killed the boat, put it kicker in neutral, ball mount neutral, because I knew how nice that fish was the whole way in. And finally, I'm trying to keep it down. And after 2 minutes, I'm like, something's not right here. And because it was coming so easy before that. And so finally, I just grabbed the rod and I just start pulling it up, trying not to keep it down, because I just wanted to see what's going on. Well, here it comes up. It's hooked in the side. And I'm like, this is the second time this year that I had that happen. I had it happen at Skakawea. I only came in with 4 fish on day 1.
Right.
Because I had the same thing happen. And whatever. It is what it is. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. But there's a half pound there. But there was also a time on day 3 where I had too much confidence in myself. And this happened to me last time in Erie, and I was literally having flashbacks when I finished in 3rd behind Ryan Buddy. I think when
Mike Defenbaugh won.
He won it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I only came in with 3 or 4 fish on day 1 in that tournament. And the reason why that happened was because I was only catching 1 fish a pass, but they're 7-pounders, whatever, on day 1. And I'm like, this is Lake Erie, I can do better. And so I spent the next 4 hours graphing around. I never found anything better, and I never went back to that spot, and I also never caught a fish. And so on day 2, I'm like, I'm going back to that school. I'm just going to work it all day because there's no one around, and I'm just going to fish it all day. And so I had 7 bites, weighed 36 pounds, whatever, and finished in 3rd. And if I just had 1 more fish on day 1, but I had too much confidence in myself, it's Lake Erie, I could do better than 1 fish a pass. I could have pulled off another win there or whatever, but it happened to me on day 3 at the championship here. I was getting 2 fish a pass. They're 4-pounders, 4.5s, and same area had this 4.7 about a mile away the day before, not 4.7, 7.5-pounder the day before, and it was just thinly scattered fish with no bait around them. So it seemed like when you put a bait in front of them, they bit, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, it's calm now. I can run around really easy. I'm gonna find the mother lode for the last hour and a half of the day and just go through a pile of them. I just need to get a 4.2-pounder out of there, and I felt like I'd have a decent shot. And so I spent the next 45 minutes running around. The chase boat was probably getting pretty mad at me because we did circles and laps and went 4 miles this way to 4.5 miles back that way. Finally, I'm like, I'm going to spend the rest of the day just driving around and not even having lines in the water. So I went wide open another 7 miles back offshore to the same school I just fished for 3/4 of the day and for the last like 20 minutes, whatever. And so, but I felt the same thing slip away. Like, I just need to work that fish, but confidence can hurt you that way, where you just, you think you got something and eventually you run out of time.
So what were you doing on Erie to catch your fish? What was the program?
It was very standard, what everyone else was doing. It's just running different crankbaits. In particular, if I was running deeper crankbaits with snap weights, say 25, 30 feet or deeper, I was running a lot slower action, deep diving baits. When they're in the top 25 feet, or especially the top 20 feet, I'd pretty much solely run flicker minnows just because they're faster action. I think the water temperature was like 57 to like 61. It cooled down a ton. And so it seemed like when those fish moved up in the water column when the sun was out, obviously they move up to feed and get some sunlight. And so faster action just seemed to trigger those fish a lot more. I think on day 3, I ended up having all flicker minnows out at the end of the day when they had moved up. But it was one of those things where you had to pay attention to your electronics. Because it could be from one pass to the next, they could be 10 feet different in the water column. I mean, we're in 45 to 50 feet generally. And so in the morning, they might be 28 to 35 feet down. And, maybe the next pass, they're 20 to 28 feet down. And they just keep moving up and down. And they might only come up for an hour. I think on day 1, they only came up for like an hour, hour and a half. And then they went right back down again. And so it's just all about making those adjustments. We only had 4 lines to run them. And so in practice, I was running 9 lines. I had 3 guys in my boat every day. And so I was running 9 lines, which can give you false hope too. And so 4 lines, you want to be as fast and efficient as you can, getting those fish in the boat and putting your baits where they need to be.
So with that, how much electronics are you utilizing during pre-fish versus tournament? I mean, it sounds like you took some time just to go find some fish during the tournament. When you get to a body of water to pre-fish, are you doing the same thing, just running around and looking for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much across the board anywhere you go. I think one thing, Lake Erie is known for is like these fish don't hold on anything. And so like, especially in the central basin closer to where we were, is there's nothing for them out there really to hold on. So they're going to move around. I knew they're going to have a lot of wind in the fall. When you get a lot of wind, you get a lot of current, things move around, fish move around. And so the whole week was all about building a baseline for like what you wanted to see on your graph, high speed graphing for how many fish you wanted to see, maybe the bait, and see where those fish are. So that way, when you turn around to make your first pass, you knew where you needed to set your lines. And so it was all coming up with how many fish I need to see. All right, we've seen them at this depth. We should put our baits out at this depth and this depth, whatever, and make it happen. And just keep doing that over and over and over again. So that way, when you came tournament time, it didn't matter where the schools of fish were that you're going to fish that day. I mean, day 1, I stopped like 4 miles short of where I was going just because my graph looked so good. I'm like, I can't drive past these. I mean, there was no one around. I'm like, why not fish a school by myself? So I turned on them, caught 6 fish in like an hour and a half. And maybe it was 8 fish or whatever. And then I'm like, all right, well, might as well get out to where I want to be. These just don't quite seem to be as big as what I think is out there. And so just one of those things where I fish in multiple schools throughout the day, in particular the school on day 2 in the afternoon and on day 3 that I fish, I really never pre-fished in that area. I was just driving through it every day out of Huron, going out to where I was 18, 20 miles out. And so, but I was going slow enough every day where I can mark fish the whole way out. And so I would just lay down waypoints both days on the way in and on the way back. So that way I could, maybe use them if I needed to. And the water was cleaning up a little bit on the inside, and that was helping for day 2 and day 3 after that northeast blow that we had. And so it was just all coming together, but you're constantly doing homework. It doesn't matter if you're just taking a 20-mile boat ride to get to where you're going to start your tournament. You still got to pay attention to your electronics because you can always learn from it.
So when I was out there and went out during pre-fish, I mean, it seems like there was just an endless supply of fish. As you drove your boat, it was you constantly, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I mean, the screen basically never went blank. I mean, there was always something on the screen, and then you get to other areas that had maybe a little bit more bait. You'd see some bait show up. And was there a connection between the fish, the bait, or the density of the fish? I mean, if they are closer together or further apart?
Yeah, there was some, and it honestly seemed like earlier in practice where there was bait, there wasn't any fish. It was weird. There's a lot of bait really close to the break line, but there wasn't really any fish with them. The fish would start about a mile or 2 out from them. And it seemed like a bunch of bait maybe moved in further out because there was some really dense packs of bait, which ended up getting a lot of fish around them in the middle of the tournament. But that Sunday, the day I think you went out on Monday, that northeast wind just flipped that lake upside down. I mean, the watercolor before then was, 5 feet or more in some spots. And there wasn't any dirty water out there, really. There was floating weeds were the only things you worried about. And then, the day that you were out there, you had that cloudy, murky water like you deal with every spring. And obviously in the fall generally out there, but it hadn't happened yet. And so it was just one of those things where you had to figure out, come after that muddy water blow, because all the colors we were using, at least for myself, like other than a couple of them, all changed. It's like what was working didn't. The fish really moved around. They weren't in as tight as schools. They're in small little packs now, and they were everywhere, like you said. And it just kept progressing as the tournament went water, and they started schooling back up again. And so it was a whole learning curve. And I got to Erie relatively earlier than I generally do. Just because it's fall on Lake Erie. If you have north winds, you don't want to be out there. And so I took all those days off that it blew north and just, saved myself for the tournament.
So you've made no bones about the fact, I mean, you keep saying that the relatively the same quote over and over, which is you don't think that you're a better fisherman than everybody, but you tend to be more efficient than most anglers. And I want to know about Korey Sprengel's habits, right? There are some anglers that when we get to a town and they may treat the tournament a little bit like a vacation, and rightly so. They got real jobs. They show up, they do the tournament. They're doing this strictly from a fun standpoint. This is your profession. This is what you do. How do you approach your travel, your time on the road, your food, your sleep, your routine? Do you have a routine?
A little bit. I mean, I've changed a little bit, I'd say, in the last, I guess 6-8 years or so. I used to be super excited when I get to town and like stressed out because I got to get out there, I got to do this, and you basically overwhelm yourself. And so, obviously, me a little bit, Chip. I'm pretty laid back, and I try to stay that way just because I roll into town. Generally my first day on the water, I might not get out there till 9 or 10, whatever. I really don't care. I'll fish till sunset if it's nice out. But it's just one of those things where I don't put pressure on myself where I have to be out there. If I don't feel good, the weather sucks, I'll come in early. Because you don't want to burn yourself out come tournament time, because that's when you're going to expel everything you got. And so to me, I get mentally exhausted more than I get physically exhausted, just because I'm always thinking. I don't go to sleep early. I usually fall asleep at like midnight, 1 o'clock. I'm not a morning person. I get out of bed and I literally get dressed and roll out the door. I don't drink coffee. I don't do anything. I don't eat breakfast. And so it's just kind of who I am and what I've always done. And so I won't get on the water necessarily, real early, but I'll stay out later if it's nice out. My dad's getting a little bit older. He doesn't like the late evening stuff, but yeah, I like traveling in my camper because once again, it keeps everything relaxed. I have everything I need with me. I can grill out every night. I have the refrigerator there. So I get back, I relax, maybe we do some stuff on the boat, throw something on the grill, and I don't have to run around trying to figure out, where am I going to eat? I'm going to meet up with these guys. We have to, sit down, whatever, waste an hour and a half each night gone just to do that. So the camper keeps everything relaxed. I just like to never get worked up for anything and don't worry about anything, because let's face it, whatever is happening in practice is going to change come tournament time. So I want to keep an open mind, not get stressed out or worried, because when it comes down to it on day one, is about the only time I'll get up early. I'm generally like one of the first 10 boats on the water. I want to get on the water and I just want to relax. I'm usually half sleeping at that time. I want to get some caffeine in me and just, kind of mentally go through and, just prepare. Like I'm just one of these people that I like to over prepare for everything. That's why I like my camper, because I can throw all the what ifs, all the extra clothes, whatever in there. And I'll just go through a lot of rods the evening before that I'll never use probably throughout the whole season, but I just want to have them ready just in case, what if. And so it's just one of those things where I've always had more success being over prepared, if it's duck hunting, if it's fishing, guiding in the wintertime, whatever it may be, because if there's like I said, a 3-minute window that I could fish a spot on the way back into a tournament, that could dictate the whole tournament. It could be the reason why I won or the reason why I didn't win. And efficiency is everything. And so just having everything prepared and ready that you might need instead of wasting the time in the boat during tournament time, because those 8 hours, I want to be as focused as I can be and, have my baits in the most high percentage spot. And I don't want to waste time retying if I don't have to.
Is it safe to say that what when you're pre-fishing for a tournament, you're basically acquiring information and you're reserving your decision making until tournament day? You're just grabbing pieces of information, where I think old school mentality when it comes to tournaments is do all this research and come up with this document proper map that says I'm going to fish in this spot from 8 a.m. till 10:30, and I'm going to fish here from 11 to 1. I'm going to fish here from 1:30 to 2, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to catch these fish, and it's all pre-mapped out. And where it sounds like the more I talk to you, that really what you're doing is just accumulating a bunch of information so that when you decide to go fishing on the first day of the tournament, you're going to utilize all this information that you just grabbed over the last week.
And that's exactly it. I mean, I feel like, the guys that you described are the guys that are overwhelmed, stressed out, and they just, when you're overwhelmed and stressed out, you don't make good decisions at all. I mean, you panic, you maybe throw a fish in you shouldn't have, you maybe leave earlier than you should have, you just don't let, your body and your mind take in the surroundings. Well, the wind's doing this, the watercolor changed, there's more bait, you don't take in everything that you might have learned throughout the week, because you're just focused on this is what needs to be happening and this is what I need to do. I've spent so many tournaments on takeoff in the morning, just driving into an area, and I just finally about halfway there, I'm like, all right, well, what am I going to do? And it's like, I have to put pressure on myself that this is a tournament. I only have 8 hours, because I can just drive around and, not think about anything and just kind of roll into this spot and do whatever. But so many times I just have to remind myself, you only have 8 hours. You need to get your butt in gear, because you don't have a lot going on right now. And so I get that laid back. When you're that laid back, you can think and you can process things, and you can have conversations with co-anglers. You can, make sure they're calm. I'm sure a majority of every co-angler that's ever been in my boat is blown away on how relaxed I am. We have conversations throughout the day, but that also keeps them relaxed. A lot of co-anglers, hop in boats and they're all nervous. They don't want to do something wrong. And I tell them every morning, let's face it, we're going fishing today. We're going to lose fish at some point today. And it doesn't matter. It's going to be a clue. We're going to have a bite that we maybe didn't know or whatever, but it's going to happen. But we're just going to go fishing. And, I always tell them, I don't want to lose any fish because we netted early. I'd rather that fish break the surface, so that way it doesn't put pressure on you or me to make that decision. When it breaks the surface, we net it. And so it's just one of those things where I try to keep everything calm on the boat, because everyone can make better decisions and everyone can perform better when they're calm.
Well, and the Pro-Am format can be really interesting that way. I mean, I think that At least I don't know it to be factual, but I know that when I stand there and talk to pros and co's as they come across a stage, there are days that there are ones that I look at and like, I don't think those two got along very well today. They just I'm just reading body language, right? And you can tell the other ones that just had a stellar time. Maybe they didn't know each other or did know each other and it all kind of came together. That was a pretty happy group in Oconto there, or Oconto, wasn't it? Yeah, first tournament of the year. That was a pretty big day. But you can tell when everybody gets along, and you can kind of tell when things didn't go so well, right?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, you're working together, unlike, the bass side, where you're separate from each other and you don't want your buddy or the guy with you to catch a fish.
Right.
It's when everyone's calm, things go better. I mean, there's going to be tough times throughout the day, and I just don't get worked out. Mentally, it might be my head just beating me, but I won't let it show to anyone, because obviously if I'm showing it, my co-angler is going to be frustrated, and we're both going to be, mad about the situation. So you obviously have to move on, and you can't change it.
So when you're, how much research ahead of a body of water are you doing before you show up there? I mean, and I'm coming off that saying, how important is networking?
So I used to do a lot. You just spend a lot of time just learning the lake, looking at maps a lot, which I still do a lot, and it's really important to do on the new ones. Enough. I've been doing enough. I've probably been to the majority of our season. Now next year we're gonna have two bodies of water I've never been to, Bismarck and Ottertail. But it's one of those things where I'll do the map research. And like Lake Erie here, this last one, I looked at a lot of fishing reports for just current stuff for, what they're catching where, out of what ports, if the fish had moved back. But a lot of what that is, I like to build just like kind of like a baseline where the fish are in the situation, the migration. And a lot of times on my first day on the water, I'm going to go to an area where I know I'm going to catch fish. Because first thing I'm going to do is build some confidence in myself. Yep, this is what they're biting on. I'm going to learn some colors. I'm going to learn some crankbaits or whatever the situation may be. I'm going to get a little confidence in when, so I start dissecting the lake full steam and trying to find all these little tiny spots that are overlooked, that I have some confidence what I'm using should work maybe. But I don't like to get a lot of, I have pretty good network of guys I know. Like when I go to Lake Erie, Ryan Buddy, me and him are very close. I actually fished with him the first day of practice. And ironically, this is really funny because I took him fishing in whatever the year was that he took second. I took him fishing. He was done flying from Detroit. So he hopped in my boat one day, and he finished second in the tournament. So we figured in this event here that I would go out there and I'd hop in his boat for the first day of practice. And he brought it up. He's like, remember the last time this happened? I finished second. And ironically, I finished second this one after hopping in his boat. And
you gotta be kidding me. That's a great story.
Yeah, we didn't tell many people we were fishing together, but it was one of those things where the buddy that I brought was really good friends with Ryan. And it's like, let's just go catch fish. I don't care, what we're doing, whatever. Let's just have fun. And, but I really don't call a bunch of people trying to get information, because what that is all history. It's all past stuff. Let's face it. Fishing reports happen the day before, the week before. What the guides are doing are generally what you don't want to be doing. But it's just an idea maybe on if fish are biting, to give you an idea. But I've got away from a lot of that, because most tournaments are not won because someone got a hot tip from someone. Because if they did, generally it steers them in the wrong direction and it just doesn't work out. And I want to find the little things myself, maybe the spot that no one's fished on the lake, or maybe a couple of guys know about, and try to find like 10 of those, just where I can grab maybe one or two fish from a spot. But I try not to get that in my head, because all it does is mess with you. I will admit that I called Chase Parsons a couple times in practice, and I always try to have him throw me a bone a little bit, give me an idea what's going on. Am I missing anything, or what's the deal? And but that's kind of our tradition. Whatever he knows, that call's coming at some point in practice. And so other than that, I just kind of do my thing. And like you said, you have to make it happen during the tournament. And I'm just doing so much homework on electronics. On days I don't feel like fishing that much because the weather sucks, I'll just drive around. I'll leave my dad back at the camper, and I'll just go out and drive around and have him pick me up later. And so it's one of those things where I try not to wear myself out and not have fun with it either, because at some point you do this long enough and you fish long enough, it becomes work at some point. And so as much as I want to just sit and beat up on fish because it's fun, there's plenty of guys that do that on tour. But I really don't want to catch that many fish in practice, because it gets in your head, it gives you false hope, and you're not learning anything other than you're catching fish and maybe this bait or that bait. I want to just find as many spots as possible, no matter where we are. And it comes down to it, even trying to fish for fun. We had Sturgeon Bay, with no tournaments on it this spring. I love fishing smallmouth up there and walleyes too. But as much as it was just going fun fishing, I wanted to learn all new spots, because, it's always just, to me, I a feeling of gratitude when I find something new. When I learn something is it's like hunting, you're trying to find something newer and something someone else hasn't fished and stuff like that. That's what's rewarding. I don't need to catch a fish. If I catch a fish on something new, that's rewarding to me, and not on something I already knew.
That's pretty cool. Are you ever paying attention to what other people are? I mean, do you pay attention to what other people are doing at all? I mean, there's everybody's. What I love about pre-fishing is that if you find yourself in a group and you're fishing with any of the pros, but I always get a kick out of it. You get a fish on, everyone's like, "Oh, keep it low, hold the rod tip down, crank it in slow. Yep. Don't let anybody else see what's going on." Is there some gamesmanship that way?
Oh yeah. And when you have a Berkeley wrap boat, it's even worse, because everyone's watching. And so honestly, it's changed. It's a lot of this stuff we're talking about is because of my boat wrap. And I guess the name that I've given myself. And I can't fish a lot of areas, because as soon as I go through there, someone else is going to be behind more times than not. And it's just the way it is, and I've learned to deal with it. And it honestly has made me better. Everything I've talked about in this whole conversation just leads in perfectly to what what we're talking about now is I have to keep moving. If I pull into areas and spend too much time, it draws too much attention, and someone's going to figure it out. And so, but I also play that game the other way. I'll maybe let someone watch me catch a fish if it means that it's going to pull them away from where I don't want them to be. And there's a lot of games to it. But I tried, once again, just not fishing a lot. And if I don't hang around an area too long, it doesn't draw any attention.
So what's next for Chase?
For Chase, or?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about, I was thinking about Chase because I'm thinking about the next bite. So yep. What is, you've aligned yourself with the guys at Next Bite. So it's Chase and Gary and Keith, but now on board we got Shakurit's jumped on board, Hoyer's jumped on board. You're there.
Chemos.
Tommy Chemos is there. Yep. I mean, that's a big conglomerate of guys working to create TV.
Yeah, it's some really exciting stuff is in the future, and we have a few more shows left to shoot this year yet. But no, I'm really looking forward to, and that's probably what I'm looking forward the most, is working with the Next Bite crew and Gary and Chase and the whole group of guys you just mentioned. We have some really exciting stuff we plan on doing here in the next year or so, changing things up a little bit. And but obviously at the end of the day, educating people on how to catch more fish and all the things we just talked about in this conversation, and finding them and figuring them out and putting it all together. And so at the end of the day, it's going to be educational. And I have fun with it. To me, TV shows are like tournaments. I mean, every fish counts. Like, you have to come in at the end of the day for a TV show with fish, just like in a tournament. And so it's really exciting filming those shows.
Well, Jason Shakura outlined a little bit of the program for me, and I love this concept where you're going to go out there, you're going to do a little pre-fishing, and then you've got your little contest amongst the two hosts that I kind of make up the whole portion of the show, which is really a cool concept.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool because you're going to have multiple perspectives on each body of water that we go to, and obviously some of us do it different than others, but there's also obviously things to learn from it. I didn't get a chance to run around to Fish Co-Angler events that much where I could pick little pieces from each person, and obviously doing it this way, we're going to have opportunities to see how guys do it different and what appeals more to each one of us. So it's going to be really cool. I'm really interested to see it all come full circle. We've been working a lot on it lately. We have to get quite a few shows done yet this year, but I'm looking forward to it. Filming with the crew of guys that we have, with the cameramen that we have, and everyone that's involved, is we all get along great. And at the end of the day, it's really enjoyable.
So what next year, National Walleye Tour, we go from 4 events to 5 events. Is this a good thing?
I really like it. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, when you think about it, we have 4 qualifiers or 4 events we have to pay for. So realistically, the expenses wise for entry fees are all going to stay the same, other than going up just a little bit. But it's going to be that no entry fee championship that I'm really looking forward to. I mean, by the sounds of it, the payouts are incredible, which are going to be good.
Oh,
And
yeah.
let's face it, I've looked back multiple times at guys that have won the championships before, and if there was ever a cut, most of them wouldn't have been there. And so it's one of those things where it's going to change things up, and I think it's going to be good for the TV show, for you to talk about on stage. Is now we have another element in the game. Not only we have Angler of the Year, you also got to get to the championship, and at the end of the day, you want to win a tournament. And so you're going to have all these, different things to think about that are going to be pulling you in different directions, but I'm really looking forward to even having a small event or a small group of anglers at the championship. It's going to allow us to maybe go to smaller bodies of water, things like that. But I'm really looking forward to it, mixing it up a little bit. Let's face it, 5 events throughout the course of a whole summer, it realistically isn't all that many. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Not compared to the bass guy. I mean, the bass guy is fully committed, and if you look at a professional bass angler's schedule, it's almost overwhelming. I mean, it's every single week they're on a new body of water fishing a new tournament somewhere, and that goes for 2/3 of the year, maybe even
Yeah, more than
It's
that,
crazy
probably.
the length of time.
Yeah, and I even look at, even a lot of the state level guys and regional guys here a little bit that, I mean, they fish, 15, 20 tournaments a year. There may be small tournaments, but it's still a lot of time. I mean, back when I started out, I'd do 15, 20 tournaments a year. And so it was crazy running around, but you have fun with it. And so I think on the tour level, adding one more tournament for 5 tournaments is fine. Because at the end of the day, it's a no entry fee championship. If you can have the time off of work or what you need to go there, it's not that much more of an expense. So realistically, it's the same entry fees and the same expenses when it comes to a lot of that.
So with the new year, new season going forward, with an Angler of the Year under your belt, does that change? Where I'm trying to figure out is what's the biggest motivator for Korey Sprengel? Is it the accolades? Is it the money? Is it beating Chase Parsons? Is it? I mean, I don't know. Or is there another individual that fires you up, or what is it that is driving you inside?
Well, maybe Hoyer fired me up a little bit last year when he had 2 wins and everything.
Well, I think the Sprengel with the circle and the cross through it.
Yeah, and so no, I mean the biggest thing to me I look forward to is just seeing the guys. That's one thing really cool about what we do is you meet a lot of people, you see a lot of different places, and I just like one thing that just drove me nuts this year is we didn't have meetings in person, and that's always the fun time to talk to the guys you haven't seen before, maybe guys I don't generally talk to ever, maybe meet them. But that's what I really enjoy is the camaraderie, the group of guys that I travel with, Jason and Kevin and Jim Schiefelbein and all our co-anglers. I mean, that's the group that I, like to hang out with. And then you throw Chase's group in there and Courts and all the other guys. I mean, we have fun together. We give each other a hard time. And that's what I really look forward to every year. At the end of the day, we go out and fish tournaments and, I want to be super competitive, but when everything we talked about through this whole thing, I try to keep level headed. So that way, when I go into the event, and go into day one of a tournament, I just go out there fishing and try to figure it out. I build all these kind of ideas in my head of what happened this and what we're going to have for weather for, tournament time, and put it all together and just not put that pressure on myself, because I've just come to find out that If you just keep level headed and, you know, think about your surroundings and what's going on, the outcomes are generally better. But I'm really looking forward to, you know, getting back to a more normalcy in 2021, hopefully, with meetings and, you know, seeing all the guys again, and then having obviously another event.
Well, I think that if people aren't familiar with what a tour really means is the travel partners and the camaraderie that goes on away from the stage and the actual tournament itself. Because it's like the blow day at the national championship this year. Everybody, there was a good sizable group of people that stumble all upon the bowling alley, and the next thing you know is a bowling tournament.
Yeah, there was money involved. I made some money on that one. So that was fun. I mean, that's honestly
career winnings. Is that what helped you get over the $500,000?
It would have helped. It was Chase got a little mouthy, and I had to put a little extra on top of it to get him to go head to head with him. But yeah, no, that's the fun
one-on-one with Chase in the bowling.
Yeah, if everyone wants to know, we had a qualifying event where there was 12 of us, and we all qualified. The top 3 people, I think, got top 4 people, maybe. No, it was 3. Got to pick their team of 4 bowlers. And so we had 3 different teams, and we bowled against our team. Won with Cavallas and Tyler Nickel. And so we had one, and at the end of it, Chase was, you know, being Chase, whatever. I'm like, you want to bowl for $100? He's like, just me and you? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yep. And so I actually had to cut, you know, let the owner kind of talk them into it, whatever, because their league was about to start. And so me and Chase bowled head to head, and I had beat him on that one too. But that's just how it is. I mean, me and Chase have so many side bets against each other, and either with Jason or whoever, and we just have fun with it. And we're always giving each other a hard time. And it's honestly probably the funnest part of everything, if they could film the TV show about what happens off the water, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens at times.
But I think that the drive to compete is also what drives to make everybody better. And then there's this whole underlying tone where everybody is supporting each other at the same time, right? And every travel group has their own little intricacies there, but everybody is also, you know, providing support and information to make everybody better anglers, which in the long run makes the competition better.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's really happened a lot in the last 3 years or so, especially, is like, it seems like the whole group of guys, from anglers to the staff, you know, obviously, you know, UChip, and even some of the sponsors involved, it seems like it really came together in the last couple of years and just worked closer with each other. And obviously wanted to see at the end of the day, the sport grow in general. It doesn't have to matter if it's, you know, someone else, if it's myself or whoever. It just, let's do this together and try to make the whole, you know, I guess, industry up here in the north for walleye bigger and better. And so it seems like it's grown together with more of like a family, and we work together. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, guys I compete with all the time. I'm willing to help them out. You know, it's just one of those things where when everyone's happy, everyone's enjoying their time.
So how could walleye tournaments be better? Is there things that you think we could do to make them better?
I mean, there's always things we can do better, right? Like, you know, it's even for myself, there's a lot of things I could do better.
Besides more money?
Yeah. Well, to me, the money, I think a lot of people forget, like, you know, our money that we can make on the walleye side is honestly really good. You look at what these bass guys are competing for, it's really close to the same for the first place payout, if not even less throughout the payout. But you need to think about, they're paying almost 5 times much more in entry fees than we are. And so most people don't understand that. So when you start to look at their payouts versus our payouts, we're doing pretty good on the payout side of things, if you ask me. And we're not investing as much money and as much time as they are. And obviously our reward can be the same, if not better. And so the payouts to me are good. I mean, if we're fishing for $100,000, I mean, to me, we don't need to fish for any more than that. You might as well put, you know, maybe some money throughout the field a little bit. But at the end of the day, $100,000 for a $1,700 or $1,500 entry fee is really good. And the last paying check is always double the entry fee, and so you can pay your entry fee and your expenses and get by. And if you can do that a couple times a year, you can come clean on a season generally. And so only things I think we can do better are, some people won't want to hear this, but is obviously some of the TV show stuff. At the end of the day, people want to be educated. It doesn't matter if it's someone that does it for as a guide or if someone that does it, once or twice a year. Someone always wants to learn, and it's people that follow me. I get questions all the time, and they just want more educational, and they want to know what we're talking about right now. If people want to see this ship, is because they want to know more. And to utilize a TV show on those key times when obviously anglers are performing better than others are that perfect time to showcase maybe what they're doing exactly and what they're doing better. I mean, FLW did a great job back in the day, and that's one thing probably the main thing I'd like to see utilize more as the TV aspect of our tournaments.
Well, and it doesn't have to necessarily be TV either. We could do it digitally. We could do it a lot of different ways. I mean, TV comes to mind first and foremost because it's the biggest profile punch, right, that the tournament circuit has. And then the viewership and the numbers are crazy. I mean, the NWT does a fantastic job of getting it out there and getting it distributed widely enough that it is viewed by big numbers. And subsequently, that's why we have the sponsorships we do, and we can award 100 grand. So one of the play a game here real quick, if you don't mind. When you end up making a post on social media talking about the fact I'm going to have you on the podcast, I get a number of people asking a lot of questions that they want to know. So I want to make sure that we get these addressed here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to rip through some Instagram questions for you, and then and let me know what you think. So from Instagram, what suggestions do you have for somebody that wants to make a living fishing in tournaments? I mean, how do you get started?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said that you didn't have to do anything other than start at the bottom, because at some point you need to learn as many things as you can before you start moving your way up. And at the same time, you need to obviously establish yourself in some kind of tournament situation and start building some sponsors. And I get this question a lot about sponsorships. At the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. It's not, I'll use myself for example. I can think back to maybe one or two times throughout my career that I was ever approached by anyone. And it's just one of those things where it doesn't happen in today's world. There's so many people that are willing to do things for, little to nothing, that a lot of companies, don't need to reach out. And so if you build that relationship when you're younger, or when you're up and coming, and it's just one of those things where you can prove yourself and you can help those companies utilize you and understand the ways that you can help them, because at the end of the day, you're going to work your way up a lot faster with a company with years of being there and them understanding who you are and having those conversations. And so when you start having success or start moving your way up to tour level, it's a lot easier to have that conversation with whoever that your boss is or the pro staff manager of, maybe reasons why you think you deserve more, or, you might want this or that. But going into a company blind and asking for a bunch of product or money or whatever it may be is a pretty tough deal to do if they have no idea who you are or no relationship with you. It's just how it is.
So one of the questions we got via Instagram was, this year's Sault Ste. Marie tournament, you end up winning Angler of the Year, but in that tournament, you were in 39th place, I think was where you finished. What's the lesson there, and what did you learn for the future in Sault Ste. Marie?
I guess Sault Ste. Marie was one of those ones where, I made a slight mistake myself by just fishing what I knew. And it was one of those things where I fished almost identical to what I fished the year before. I had the confidence in that area to make it happen. I had the bites. I just didn't execute. On day one, I only came in with 4. I lost my 5th fish like 3 times. And that was when I came in with that tooth on my treble hook. Of all things, how do you get a tooth T-boned on a treble hook? And I had that fish halfway back to the boat. And then on day 2, I don't know what the deal was. I only had 2 bites. But the moral of the story was, Jim Schiefelbein travels with us, and we kind of played a safe game plan. It was a culling tournament. I should have knew better than just go for it right away in the morning, but I wanted to get 5 fish, and he went for it. We started in the same spot, but he just didn't get the bites, and he went for it, and he was leading the tournament on day 1. And so it was one of those things where I kind of made the mistake myself and played it too safe. I can't say Angler of the Year was in the back of my head, but I just had a lot of confidence in that I could, weigh a decent limit doing what I was doing.
So Instagram question again, favorite body of water and why?
Honestly, I had so much fun at Lake Sakakawea this year when we were there. It was, I didn't want to leave. It was so good. It reminded me so much of bass fishing. I was throwing jerk baits and lipless baits in like 15 feet of water or less, up in the 5 feet of water. And I caught my 2 biggest fish on day 2 on jerk baits. They're both 25 inches, and I can guarantee I was the only one ripping a jerk bait for walleyes out there that day. And it was so fun. They just explode on it. But that fishery is just endless. Like, it doesn't seem like you'll ever learn enough on that place because there's so many places to fish. And with it being a smelt fishery, there's so much food in there. But with that being a given, you can trigger fish to bite so easy with having that much food around them and just being super erratic and fast. And so I had a lot of fun at Sakakawea.
Another Instagram question was, you credit your electronics for a lot of your success. How do you improve on reading electronics both at speed and when you're actually fishing?
The only way to improve on them is just using them more. I mean, every brand is different. I run Lowrance because it's honestly what I've owned since I've been like 16 years old. And it's just one of those things where I'm comfortable with them and I understand them. And every electronics are a little bit different. You can, obviously interpret them all the same maybe at the end of the day, but some of them might not have the benefits that other ones do. But the more you use anything, the more you're going to learn from it. With fish catches, with seeing this size of fish on your screen and this is what you're catching, you're relate to that. All of your electronics, the main things that you need to understand about sonar is how fast your boat's going, because that's going to dictate the length of the fish and the size of the fish. And then obviously your depth range, because your screen is always going to be the same size. And if you're in 10 feet of water versus 60 feet of water, it's the same size screen. It just condenses everything more. So keeping in mind boat speed and the depth range that you're in is obviously always going to help you dictate on what you're seeing for that size. And, obviously how much information is being condensed into there is the most important things when it comes to sonar, especially 2D.
Facebook question for you would be, you put in a good pre-fish, you think you've got some ideas of where, when, and how to start fishing, but then a big cold front hits. Where do you start then?
It sounds like every day one to a tournament. It's just one of those things where if it's going to be a cold front situation, a lot of times if it's the first day of a cold front, it doesn't worry me as much as it does on the second day of a cold front. It seems like that's one of your tougher days. But at the end of the day, I'm either going to go one way or the other. And it's either going to be super extreme on the, reaction bite, fishing very fast, don't let them, think about it just to try to trigger a few bites, or it's just going to be the vice versa. But I'm probably going to go super fast right away, try to trigger a couple bites. And after that, if that doesn't work, generally the afternoon is even tougher. And then I'm going to slow down with something, a lot slower presentation.
So in Korey Sprengel's career, is there any one moment that was the biggest breakthrough moment?
It was probably a lot of that 2012 FLW win in Escanaba. And it was probably, I was thinking about this the other day, I get the question asked a lot about high-speed graphing, and that was kind of when I really gained confidence in it, because at that time, 2010, and we didn't have a lot of runoff then, and the Great Lakes were super clear. And so like that event, I think you could see bottom in like 20 to 25 feet or more in some areas. And so you weren't going to mark a fish trolling in 25 feet or less because those fish just scattered away. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise that I learned how to drive around and mark fish at plane and really put it together. So that way when I come into an area, I knew fish were there, and that was one of the hardest things. You could fish Escanaba for a week and never mark a fish, but catch fish every day. But if you knew where they were on the piece of structure and you just, needed to know that you needed to put your baits in the right area, or maybe your colors were wrong, but you always knew you were around fish if you could map them out before you got in there. And the particular area I won that tournament on, there wasn't a fish, I don't think, for 5 miles other than that one point. And me, Shimoda, and Minky at the time fished that area for 3 days, or maybe it was 4 days back then. But had it almost all to ourselves because there was nothing else around. And but we knew how many fish were there from driving around. They're in like 18 to 22 feet. I think I marked like 3 fish that whole tournament because it was cloudy one morning. But it just gave me confidence in that I could use that electronics that fast and cover that much water and just be that much more efficient. And utilize that totally, especially in the next Green Bay event for the National Walleye Tour in 2013. And just broke down the body of the water that much faster.
There you go. Well, Korey, thank you very much for making the time here today. It's good to get caught up and figure out, kind of relive some of the moments over this past year, as well as get some insight of what's coming with the new Next Bite television program and your role there. That's really exciting stuff, man. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
I'm even more excited because next year's National Walleye Tour schedule, which I'm assuming you like, is going to ends up with even bigger checks than we've had in the past. I mean, I'm expecting a lot bigger fields. Just with the places that we picked at the times that they have chosen, I'm anticipating some huge numbers.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I think it's gonna be good, and a lot of guys will see there's multiple Dakota events on there, but I think the one thing people are forgetting is our growth is so big in North and South Dakota. That if it wasn't for a lot of those guys, we wouldn't have a lot of the fields we have as we go around the country. And so I'm looking forward to the Dakotas. The Dakota fisheries are always good. I've never fished Bismarck before, but a river event in the springtime, with a rod in your hand potentially, I'm really looking forward to those events. Seemed like this year is all about trolling everywhere we went, and I'm ready to have the jig rod back in hand and do work that way.
All right. Well, best of luck to you next year. And thanks again, Korey.
Thanks for having me, Chip.
That is a remarkable human being, Korey Sprengel. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. His perspective is really amazing, from as young a man as he really is, and being able to pick apart what's important and what's not in preparation for a tournament and stay as relaxed as he does in his ability to make decisions under pressure is quite astonishing. I think there's no doubt that Korey would be successful, whether he's fishing walleye tournaments, bass tournaments, or whatever he aspires to do in the rest of his life. Right now, he's the hottest walleye angler in North America, and there is no doubt about it. Please, thanks for joining us on this one. Get to episode 10. Pick apart how he fishes Green Bay in Oconto. And at the same time, make sure you drop down right now, hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode of the Wildside podcast. We're glad to have you. Grateful you stopped by. And we invite you to get to chipleer.com. Register there so we can deliver to you in your email everything that's happening in our world. Until then, explore your wild side and be your best.